I'm so glad Kyle ended with that song, Overwhelmed, because it reminded me, if you were here, we did a series called Overwhelmed for about a month where we talked about the bigness and grandeur of God and how His fingerprints are all over all of creation. And many of you guys, we got to talk about it a little bit, and you were just like, wow, God is so big, and I am so small, and we were just in awe of God together. And so now that we've started this dating series, it almost feels like quite the shift, doesn't it? It's like we started off the year talking with something that felt so serious and deep and purposeful, and now we're moving on to talk about relationships with guys and gals. But let me tell you something. That is entirely on purpose. Because you see, the same God who breathes the galaxies into existence and holds it all together, He cares deeply about how you approach dating. That should tell you something. This isn't some completely separate category for God. Just as Jesus rules over, just as He's Lord over the furthest reaches of the universe, He wants to be Lord over your dating life as well. So, last week we kicked off this dating series called Relationship Goals. We talked about some ways to approach dating, and obviously I didn't scare you off yet because you came back for some more, so I'm glad, I'm thankful. But we're going to spend several weeks talking about relationships, dating, and guys and gals. We'll talk about marriage and sex and all those things from a Christian perspective. And at the end of the series, what we're going to do is we're going to do a special FAQ night where you're going to be able all the next few weeks to text in any questions you have about guys, gals, dating. So put that in your phone, that number. Text, it's a Google Voice number, if you know what that is. Sends me an email. It's anonymous, all right? So text in your questions, anything I don't touch on in the next few weeks. I'm going to do my best to hit on that last night, okay? So it's your chance to ask some further questions. Text it to that number, 501-463-6787, all right? You know, since the dawn of time, guys have been doing things to try to impress girls, right? You know what I'm talking about? Guys will do things that otherwise they wouldn't do just to catch a girl's eye, right? It's the, hey, watch this, right? You know what I'm talking about? Usually followed by an unimpressive stunt of some sort. Or sometimes they'll sacrifice things. They'll give some stuff up, right? They're trying to earn the favor of a girl. Well, recently I read this really interesting story that I thought was really funny. I'd share with you about a guy who did something to impress a girl. So I just want to read this to you real quick. Get your thoughts, okay? Once upon a time, there lived a guy who had a terrible passion for baked beans. You can see where this is going. He loved them, but they always had an embarrassing and somewhat lively gaseous reaction on him. You know what I'm talking about? One day, this guy met a girl, and he realized he really liked her. And when they first started dating, he thought to himself, she will never be with me if I continue on like this. So he made the supreme sacrifice and gave up his favorite food, baked beans. So they go along. They started dating. A few months later, on his birthday, he was on his way to her house to pick her up for a date when his car broke down. See, she lived out in the country, and so he called his girlfriend and he told her what happened, but she, like most girls, was nowhere near ready to go yet. And so he said, you know what, I'll just walk the rest of the way. We've got time, and once I get there, we'll take your car. So as he was on his way, he passed by a small cafe, and the wonderful aroma of, you guessed it, baked beans hit his nostrils and overwhelmed him. And since he had a few miles left to walk, he thought, you know what, I can walk off any ill effects that may come in the next few miles before I get there. I mean, it was, after all, his birthday. The man should have his favorite food on his birthday. So he went in, he ordered, and before leaving, he had 3 extra large helpings of baked beans. And all the way to her house, the guy let the gas pass and just putted along. And by the time he arrived at the house, he thought, okay, I feel reasonably safe now. And when he got there, his girlfriend meets him at the door and seems somewhat excited. And she exclaimed, honey, I have the most wonderful surprise for you before we head out tonight. And so she put a blindfold on him. She led him to a chair at the table and made him promise not to peek at his birthday present. And at this point, he was beginning to feel some effects of that gas building once more, all right? And just as his girlfriend was about to remove the blindfold, her phone rang. And so she made him promise again not to peek until she got back, and she went in the other room and took the phone call. While she was gone, he decided to seize the opportunity. So he shifted his weight to one leg and let go. Good thing she was not in there, because it was not only loud, but it was ripe as a rotten egg. He had a hard time breathing, so he felt for a napkin and began to fan the air. And he had just started to feel better when another urge came on. And so he raised his leg and let out what sounded like a diesel engine revving and smelled even worse. And to keep from gagging, he's flailing his arms about, trying to make the gas dissipate. And then he got another urge. And this one, y'all, this one was a real blue ribbon winner, all right? The windows shook. The dishes on the table rattled. And a minute later, the flowers on the table are dead. With his blindfold on, still, he heard his girlfriend wrapping up the conversation in the other room, and he could tell, all right, she hasn't heard a thing. She doesn't suspect. And so, smiling contentedly, he was the picture of innocence when his girlfriend walked back in. And she apologized for taking so long and asked him if he'd peeked to see his surprise yet. And after assuring her that he had not peeked, she removed the blindfold and yelled, "Surprise!" To his shock and horror, all of their family and friends were seated around the table the whole time. And that man's name was Chris Wasson. Just kidding. She said, I do. Oh, my God. She said, I do not. But maybe you've been around guys, or maybe you've been that guy who's tried to impress a girl before in different ways. Guys, naturally, you want to catch the eye of a girl, and girls want to know what things should you be looking for in a guy. So tonight, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about, what to look for in a guy. And even more so, this is really for you guys, because it's what kind of man are you becoming, all right? And spoiler alert, your gassy ways aren't as impressive as you think they are, all right? But seriously, we need to talk about this, because the world tells you a lot of things about what it means to be a man, right? And the world tells you, ladies, a lot of things about what you really should look for in a guy. And so we need to strive for a biblical picture of what to look for in a guy, because let's be honest, ladies, some of you have some lists of what you want in a man, right? You've done those before. And if we were for real, and you've made some of those, let's be honest, a lot of the time it's really shallow stuff, or even idolatrous. And so some of y'all, you're holding out for that Ryan Gosling type guy, right? Let's throw that up there. You know what I'm talking about? Hey girl, is your name Google? Because you've got everything I'm searching for, right? Yeah. That's not the part to take notes on, guys, all right? Gotta drive that home each week. But you're waiting for Ryan Gosling to show up and greet you with that heart-melting, hey girl, before offering to take you shopping and then rub your feet while you watch The Notebook each night, eating ice cream, right? And if that's what you're holding out for, ladies, I just got to tell you, have fun living with 30 cats one day, okay? Because it's not coming. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't be attracted to the guy. Yes, you certainly should. You absolutely should have high standards. But you don't just need high standards, you need the right standards. So ladies, I want to give you ladies 6 questions, all right? If you're taking notes, this is the time to grab that pen and paper. 6 questions to ask when you're determining what to look for in a guy. And along with these 6 questions, each one will reveal an identity of what you're looking for in a guy. And guys, like I said, if you're smart, this is the part where you want to take notes, because I'm about to tell all the girls what to look for. Okay. Number one, does he have a heart for God? Does he have a heart for God? What I'm talking about is you want somebody really who's a worshiper, but you got to ask, does he have a heart for God? You see, the question used to be, is he a Christian? That's not the real question anymore, because let's be honest, in our culture, there's a difference between a guy who says he's a Christian and a guy who really has a heart for God a lot of the time. It's easy for you to find someone in the South who will claim to be a Christian. And usually, ladies, it comes after he's already met all of your other criteria, like that security blanket, just to justify that he's okay to date, right? You got that check mark. So, yeah, he's good looking and he's kind and he's athletic. Okay. Oh, and he's a Christian. Awesome, right? You just want to check mark that box, but really you need to ask, does he have a heart for God? Does he love Jesus? Is he passionately pursuing a relationship with him first and foremost? Is God at the center of his life, or is it something he just claims along with a million other things? Is Christian just one of many things that describe him, or is it the center from which everything else in his life flows? So ladies, you don't want a guy who just mentally check marks that Christian box, but whose heart is still far from worshiping Jesus. You want a guy who makes you, catch this, you ladies want a guy who makes you want to love Jesus more. So, open up a Bible or Bible app. Turn with me to Mark chapter 12. Mark chapter 12. Probably a familiar verse for a lot of y'all. During Jesus' life on earth, there was a time where some of the scribes, some of the religious leaders came to him, and these religious folks, and they were arguing with each other about what the most important commandment of the Bible was for them to keep, and so they asked Jesus about it. And look at his response. Mark chapter 12, picking up in verse 29. Jesus answered them, and he said, "The most important is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength." So if that is what Jesus says is the most important thing about life, the most important commandment, then you need a guy in your life who doesn't just claim the label Christian, but who actually looks like someone who loves the Lord with all he is. Don't settle for less. So the first question you ask is not, is he a Christian? But does he have a heart for God? Number two, how does he treat his family and friends? How does he treat his family and friends? This is going to tell you what kind of lover he is, and not that weird kind of lover, right? Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying, like, literally, how does he love other people? Does he love people well? How does he treat those that are close to him? Does he seem different in how he deals with other people versus how he deals with you? Does he seem like a different person altogether around them? Does he talk bad about close people in his life when they're not around? That should give you an indication of how he will treat you when you get close. I'm friends with a family. Actually, friends with the whole family. They had 3 boys, and they're all grown men now. They're all married. A couple of them have their own kids. But I'll never forget hearing this story about this family. That one day, you see, the dad of that family always made it really, really clear to those boys that they were to treat their mom with the utmost respect. They knew, those guys knew, you did not cross the mama bear without getting the papa bear's wrath, okay? So he made that very, very clear. And one day at breakfast, the youngest of the guys, the youngest brother was being a loudmouth, and he was getting in trouble more and more with each second. And so he's mouthing off to their mom, and all of a sudden he just yells out, "I wish you would just shut up." And my friend, his name's Jason, he's sitting at the table, and he said, next thing he knows, his oldest brother reaches over and decks his youngest brother, knocks him out unconscious on the floor. And he said, I'm just sitting there eating my Wheaties going, this is about to get good. Better than TV. He said, what's coming? And he said, His dad stood up, wiped his mouth, and looked at him and said, when he gets up, hit him again. And walked off. And he said, they knew you didn't mess with the mama bear. Now this dad, he's a pastor. He's actually a mentor of mine. He's a traveling missionary, okay? This isn't an abusive family, right? But the point that the dad made that morning was clear, wasn't it? You don't disrespect his bride. It matters how the guys you're talking to talk to their moms, their sisters. Ladies, you need to ask, how does the guy that you're interested in talk to his mom? How does he talk to his sisters? Because those are the close women in his life. And if you're going to be a close woman in his life, you need to know that. Does he talk down to them? Is he hateful towards them? Is he rude? Is he constantly sarcastic? Or is he tender? Is he respectful? Does he seem to honor and cherish them? That is a big reveal for how he views women and how he will one day view you. Also, do those that know this guy feel better and built up because of their friendship with him? Or do they feel lesser and torn down constantly? Right? Don't give in to the lie that it'll be different because he loves you different. He's putting on his best face when he's dating you. All right? The best. You have to be able to analyze carefully how he treats others. So, number 3. Does he initiate and have good intentions? Because really what you're looking for is a leader. Does he initiate and have good intentions? Does he initiate? We touched on this some last week if you were here. But the guy should be the one to stick his neck out. You don't want a guy who's constantly making you be the ones to spell things out in the relationship. You don't want a guy who makes you reveal your heart before he reveals his. That's not fair. That's not what a leader does. That's a big indication about how he will lead as a husband one day. You don't want a guy that's going to throw you under the bus, but who would rather do the hard work of being a servant leader himself. And you know, are his intentions clear? Are they good, right? If he's not willing to take a stance and make clear what he is intending for the relationship, he's not worth your time. He's not ready. And these should be good intentions, because y'all know some guys will make their intentions very clear and they're not good. You don't want a guy who's all about the physical. You don't want a guy who says, well, I just want to have fun and see what happens. No. Don't get me wrong, it is about enjoying each other's company and about having fun, but real true fun, not the worldly shallow stuff that doesn't ultimately satisfy your soul. So, does he make it clear what he's hoping to do? And does he initiate? And I have to confess to you guys, in high school, in college, I was awful at this. I was bad. It should have been a clue to me that I wasn't ready. It should have been a clue to the girls I was dating that I wasn't ready to date. And some of y'all are like, yeah, right, Pastor Ryan, I'm sure you really had to beat the girls off with a stick. Okay, thanks for the negativity, but I happen to be funny and witty, and Dad bought us in, so I've got that going, I'm told. And I ended up with a wife who's a 6-foot-tall Amazon of beauty of a woman, so there you go. But seriously, I was really bad at this. I wasn't this kind of leader, and so I didn't initiate. And even though I had kind of the first 2 things down, right, I had a heart for God, and I treated the women in my life well, my family and friends, but I didn't stick my neck out there, right? I wanted to let the girls do that part because I was scared. I'd hang out with girls, but I wouldn't make it clear what the relationship exactly was. I just kind of let it stay in that limbo because I was going to string them along, really, until I tried to decide whether I liked them enough. I wasn't trying to get anything physical out of them. I wasn't trying to intentionally sin against them anyway. But what I realized later is I was not a leader. I was not ready. I did not have a concern for their emotions or for making my intentions clear. Guys, it's important to do those things to show that you're ready to be a leader. You're ready for a relationship. Ladies, it's important to have a guy who's going to take the lead. And think about this. If you're going to have a leader, you need to see him lead in something at some point, right? I'm not saying he has to be captain of everything or on stage in front of a bunch of people. I'm just saying, if you're looking for a leader, have you seen him in any situation in which he's shown himself to be a leader? Whether it's at school or church or class, whatever. With his friends. What makes you want him to lead you? Because you need to know. Does he lead in what it looks like to be a servant? Because we'll talk about this more here in a few weeks when we get to the message on marriage. But Ephesians 5 gives us a picture that husbands are to lead and to give of themselves for the good of their wives, just like Christ did for the good of his bride, the church. So that's what you should look for in a guy. Taking the awkwardness on is one way a guy is able to image the Lord Jesus. Because Jesus took our shame and our awkwardness and our sin on himself. And if the guy's not willing to sacrifice a little embarrassment or pride from the start, why would he do that when things got a lot more serious? So you need to know, is he a leader? Number 4, does he stand up for what is right? Does he stand up for what is right? You want a fighter, and not just a brawler, but a fighter for the right kinds of things. Look at what 1 Timothy chapter 6 says. Verse 11, it says, "But as for you, O man of God, flee these things. Pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, steadfastness, gentleness. Fight the good fight of the faith." Fight the good fight of the faith. See, right before this passage, Paul is writing here to a guy named Timothy. Good guess. All right. It's going to get harder. All right. Paul's writing to Timothy, and he's talking about the dangers of worldliness. And he gets here, and he tells Timothy, hey, as a man of God, here's what you need to do. You need to flee from those things. You need to run away from these temptations and sin and run towards these things: righteousness, godliness, faith, love, etc. And you need to fight the good fight of the faith. So ladies, if you're wanting a man of God, you need a man who will stand up for what is right. Is he a fighter for the right things? Meaning, is he passionate about the gospel? Does he fight sin and temptation in his own life? Does he repent? Does he admit when he's wrong? You want a guy who is fighting for holiness. That doesn't mean you need to know all his dirty laundry sin right now, but does he have godly people who hold him accountable? Who challenge him in the faith? Is he trying to fight the good fight of the faith? And by the way, how he handles confrontation will tell you a lot about him. Is he passive? Is he an avoider? You don't want someone who's just going to avoid every tough situation that comes his way. Does he look people in the eye and respectfully engage? Or is he passive? Or is he overly aggressive? Because you also don't want someone who's going to be picking a fight over every little insignificant thing. If he gets really loud and really angry over little things now, that's the type of guy who, when you're married, is going to threaten to leave you over really little things then. You want a guy that's going to fight for your marriage. Who's going to fight for the right things. Fighting for the gospel, fighting for holiness is another way a guy's able to image our warrior King Jesus, who fights for God's glory and our good. Jesus never compromises on the gospel, and he never ceases to step up when he needs to. You need a man that will follow Jesus in doing the same. Catch this. One of the number one reasons that I see students walk away from the church is because of an unhealthy dating relationship. You need someone who will stand up for what is right instead of someone who's going to draw you away from what is right. You need that. Number 5. Does he make wise decisions? Does he make wise decisions? You're looking for this identity of a sage. You know what a sage is? That's a fun word. A sage. A sage is just another word for a wise person. That's like someone you would go to for advice on things, right? A sage. Some of y'all know one of my favorite awkward things I love to say when you leave is, make smart choices! And you're like, you're embarrassing in front of me, in front of all my friends. Well, of course, I want to make smart choices. But seriously, I'm not saying the guy you want to date has to be a genius, right? And some of you guys are like, thank you, Pastor Ryan. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about knowledge. I'm talking about wisdom. Is there any evidence that he's growing in wisdom? It has a lot less to do with his GPA and a lot more to do with how he's applying the gospel to his life. Does he think through things purposefully, like his actions and their ramifications? How does he handle situations that come up? One indication as to whether someone is growing as a sage in wisdom is if they're under someone else's accountability and leadership. Does he have people in his life? Because there's no such thing as a self-made wise man. It's the pinnacle of foolishness to think, hey, I've got this. I don't need help with sin. I don't need help with whatever. Look at what Proverbs 12:15 says. Throw this up. We're going to throw this up on the screen. Proverbs 12:15. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. And really, you need to know, is he humble? Is he humble? Because that's the complete opposite of the guy who's proud and stuck up and full of himself. You don't need that guy. You need a guy who is humble isn't just a weakling or a pushover. That's not what it means to be humble. He can still be strong. We're looking for a fighter. But he acknowledges his need for God. He acknowledges his need for others to come alongside him. Humility is the key to wisdom. You don't grow in wisdom by assuming a position that says, I've got it all together. It doesn't work like that. Until you admit your need for help, until you admit your sin, your weakness, you can't grow. And ultimately, Proverbs 9 puts it like this: the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You want somebody who is growing in wisdom, who can offer up wise counsel, who can lead wisely, who fears and respects the Lord above all. Last question, number 6. Does he take responsibility? Does he take responsibility? This reveals whether he's a worker. This is this worker identity. Does he take responsibility? Colossians chapter 3, 23-24 says, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. So the real question is, will he be one of those guys who's 37 years old, living in his parents' basement still with no job, no income, playing video games 10 hours a day while he sits in his holy underwear on a beanbag eating Cheetos? You don't want that for many reasons. But that's getting far too common in guys. It's what society calls extended adolescence, where they just keep on being boys and don't ever really grow into men. Ladies, does he consistently take the easy road? The easy way out? Does he only do what he has to do to get by in whatever it is? Or do you ever see him go above and beyond? Does he show that there are things that he really cares about and he puts extra effort in? Even the things he doesn't like. Does he do his best? Does he work at it in an effort to glorify the Lord? Or does he give up easily? You don't want a guy who gives up easily. You don't want to be attached to that in the long run if he's a guy who just gives up easily. You want to end up with a guy who cares enough to put in the extra effort of a relationship. Marriage is hard work. It's awesome. It's great. But it takes a lot of sacrifice and humility and effort. So you need a man who's going to step into that. Go the extra mile for you, knowing he's serving the Lord as he serves you. You see, there's a difference. There's a difference in a man and a boy who can shave. Seriously. Maybe he went through puberty and started shaving, but still lives like a boy. Or is he growing into a man who takes responsibility? You want a man who'll be the kind of guy to take things upon his shoulders. That's especially important when it comes to leading in a relationship. Will he set a godly tone for the relationship physically, emotionally, spiritually? Or will he be the kind of guy that's going to make you make those calls? You don't want a guy who's always going to be pressing the boundaries or who refuses to set them. Does he blame shift? You know what I mean? Or does he own up? Remember that story from Genesis 3, right? Very beginning of the Bible, you've got Adam and Eve. Man, it's a tough night. Hard questions. Adam and Eve. Eve eats the fruit of the tree that God had told them not to and gave some to her husband, who the Bible tells us was with her the whole time. He was passive. He didn't step in and lead. And then it says he ate some too. And then God comes to Adam and he says, "Bro, what happened?" Right? That's a literal translation. "Bro, what happened?" And Adam said, "Well, it was the woman that you gave me." He didn't confess his own sin. He just shifted all the blame over to her. And he even blamed God. Because he said, "It was the woman that you gave me." He's not taking responsibility. And ever since sin entered the world, men, we blame shift. And men don't admit their mistakes. They don't ask for forgiveness. They say that things are really someone else's fault a lot of the time. And that's all of our temptation as men since Genesis 3. But ladies, you need a man like Jesus who did not blame shift, but instead owned sin that wasn't even his. He took it on himself. He took responsibility for you and me. And really, you want to know, is this guy you're interested in, is he a man of his word? Does he call when he says he's going to call? Or text when he says he's going to text? Does he show up when he says he's going to show up? Does he do what he says he's going to do? I mean, I'm not saying these guys have to be perfect or never late for any reason whatsoever. I'm just saying, what's his character? Is he consistently faithful, or does he always seem to have an excuse? Catch this. If you miss everything else tonight, don't miss this. If you can't trust him now, how can you trust him when he says, "I do"? If you can't trust him now, how are you going to trust him when he says, "I do"? So, let's look back. Let's review. Does he have a heart for God? How does he treat his family and friends? Does he initiate and have good intentions? Does he stand up for what is right? Does he make wise decisions? Does he take responsibility? You want a guy who is a worshiper, a lover, a leader, a fighter, a sage, and a worker. And girls, you need to ask yourself, are these the things I'm going to look for in a guy, or am I going to just stick to my own list? Because you're going to be tempted to justify it in light of whoever comes your way, right? You want to make it look better for him than it really is, and you're going to want to lower your standards, and you need to decide, ladies, do I want what I think is better for my life and marriage, or do I want what God knows is best? It's important. And ultimately, the reason I'm telling you to only look for a man with such high standards is because Jesus is the only one who fits the bill perfectly 100% of the time. I want you to pursue him first and foremost, but then as you're doing that, find a guy that looks like Jesus. I'm not talking about a bearded homeless man looking dude. I mean his character. Does this guy seem like Jesus that I read of in Scripture? Men, guys, dudes, bros, males. As I've been saying tonight, really this was aimed at serving you guys. Who should you be striving to grow into? What kind of man are you becoming? But, guys, there's nothing I said tonight that you can accomplish by yourself in your own strength. Absolutely nothing. Nothing inside of you that ultimately has these things. The only hope you have to be a godly man is that Jesus would ruin you for you, guys. Jesus is all of our only hope to be the man he calls us to be. So guys, if you felt picked on tonight, just remember, we're going to pick on the girls next week. So that'll be good. Next Wednesday, we'll be talking about what to look for in a girl. So you don't want to miss that either.